BLOCKCHANCE 2021.
Wonderful. So thanks for having me. It's great to be back in Hamburg. I used to spend the last 20 years almost here, as Max said, also engaged in politics. And one of my initiatives that I had in previous years was actually to introduce the Hamburg coin. So the Hamburg State Parliament a couple of years ago was actually the first out of 16 state parliaments in Germany that at least discussed the idea of introducing a local digital token for the city itself. As you know, Hamburg is a city-state, so that makes it easy on the one hand. On the other hand, it makes it difficult when great ideas come from the opposition party. So, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to steal too much of the time with introducing ELNET. If you have questions, ask me afterwards. We are probably the largest network across Europe that connects Europe and Israel in politics, in business, and in academia. And we have a large focus on innovation. So as Max said, one of the programs we have is the German-Israeli network of startups and Mittelstand, which has probably something like 27 different institutional partners and is sponsored by the German Economic Ministry, by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Health. So that is in a nutshell what we do, connecting decision makers and bridging the gap, building connections and networks between Europe and Israel with strategic dialogues, delegations, and so on. Quite helpful is to have Brigitte Zypries as the former Federal Minister of Economic Affairs and Energy as a chairwoman of our advisory board, and she is indeed, maybe you wouldn't believe it, but she is also quite enthusiastic about blockchain, and whenever we discuss opportunities to bring together the right people from Germany and Israel, she is in. So let's now do a deep dive and talk about learnings from Israel. You may know that Israel actually is #1 globally in terms of startup concentration, or saying a number of startups per capita. From 1,600 graduates from a university, there is one startup. Imagine how it would be here in Germany. It's probably 1.6 million graduates from university and one startup. So, but that's the situation in Israel. It's a highly innovative country. You have the big hotspots. Tel Aviv, by the way, it was released in a different study 2 days ago. Tel Aviv is now the most expensive city on earth. Nonetheless, it's a great place to visit if you haven't been there. Beersheba in the desert, Jerusalem, Haifa, and between those cities and in those cities, you can find today more than 7,000 technological companies, startups striving to conquer the world. Israel is also, and this is probably quite relevant for some of you who are looking for investment opportunities or for investors, Israel is #1 in terms of venture capital per capita and also per percentage of the GDP of the country. You can find more than 24 incubators and accelerators there, and over 300 venture capital firms. And by the recent study in September, Israel counts 68 unicorns. 68. Just alone in the year 2019, 11 have been added. Does anyone know the number of unicorns that have been added in Germany or in UK or in France in 2019? Any ideas? 2, 3, 4, yeah, absolutely. For those 3 countries, it was 2, 3, and 4. 11 for Israel, that has a population of 9 million people and roughly the geographical size of the state of Hesse, if you're from Germany. What is the background of this innovation system? It's education. They do screen very early for talents. It is indeed the military. You may have heard of the Israeli Defense Forces Unit 8200, which is basically one of the tech units of the Israeli armed forces that further educates young talents on programming, on coding, and so on. And it's a lot about mindset, called chutzpah, just trying to do it. As Max said, my motto is, let's innovate, so let's just try to do it. So what does this mean for blockchain? Israel is considered as the startup nation, and some journalists adopted this and say, no, it's also already the blockchain nation. So I had a look before I came to Hamburg today, and roughly by today you can find about 120 companies in the blockchain sector that are officially listed in the Startup Nation central database. Among them, 60 have a focus on encryption, a bit more than 20 have a focus on tokenization. And if you have a look where blockchain is already applied or at least tested, you can find various fields in Israel, governmental usage, but also private sector like banking. Citibank just opened up a new lab in Israel and is hiring blockchain talents there for the banking solutions. IBM is working on a new solution for digital health that will help us to have in one app a secure solution for our health pass, for our vaccination passes, for our test certificates and all these things. Because coming from various countries, you probably all are aware of this difficult situation we are all in. So every country is dealing with the situation differently in terms of certificates, in terms of proof of health. And if you're traveling around the world, you do see that these differences actually do hinder lots of things. So IBM is working on a solution based on blockchain for that. And sports. Who is not a fan of sports? And we all have been there. We couldn't make it to a certain game we just bought tickets for. Would have been the same for a cultural event. So what are we doing? We're selling the tickets. And hopefully we're finding someone. And on the other side, there is someone standing saying, hey, I got these tickets, great. But maybe to some of you it has happened that you bought your tickets, arrived at a certain event, presented your tickets. They're not valid. They're fake. Can this happen with blockchain technology-based solutions? Nope. It should not be possible to happen any longer to you or your friends or ever who's buying tickets online. So Infront is working on a solution on a blockchain technology based exactly for that purpose. At the beginning, I mentioned the Hamburg coin, the initiative we discussed here in the Hamburg State Parliament. It was declined in those days, unfortunately. The state of Israel is much more advanced on this than the state of Hamburg used to be. So the digital shekel is the Israeli currency, is indeed in the making. So this is my a case study that I brought for today. The Bank of Israel already is working on such a solution since 2017 to support the digital economy, to reduce cash, and also to speed up cross-border transactions. The goal basically is several-fold. It's first of all what I just mentioned, but there's also another strategic goal of the Central Bank of Israel that is hindering a further fragmentation of the payment system. Because we all know there are so many cryptocurrencies, so many digital currencies issued today from various providers, some working internationally, some just working locally. So this is indeed an issue. Also from the state perspective, because obviously you want to have some kind of control over your currencies. And so like other countries, Israel is working on a central bank digital currency, so a crypto version of the shekel. They started a first study, did some more research, preparations accelerated, and during this summer there was a pilot program issued based on Ethereum. So they built some teams, they built the right environment, they issued some tokens, created wallets, and teams are now trying to basically exchange those digital shekels. If you ask the Central Bank of Israel if this project actually has an ultimate end, they say, we don't know. We're just testing. Usually, if central banks do issue certain test programs, they would always define a clear start and a clear ending. Here, because everything is unsure, everything is new, Israel is doing it the same way like I think it's Thailand, Hong Kong, and Australia, just trying what is possible in this environment. There are some challenges. I'm happy to discuss them also later on and hear your opinion on them. So the Bank of Israel says it is unsure if the CBDC is indeed a way that serves all the needs of the general population. So we could now discuss if such a digital currency is actually needed to serve all needs of a general population. However, coming from the perspective of the central bank in charge of the regular currency of the country, obviously this is a pretty good reason to discuss. Second, the Central Bank of Israel says a big challenge is that the infrastructure is not ready. So not talking about the situation that not every inhabitant of the State of Israel already has a wallet. I mean, this is something that could probably be solved quite easily. But the problem is what to do in case of breakdown of the system. So how do you still ensure as a central bank of the country that people can still, if you would switch to a complete digital version of your currency midterm, what to do in a complete breakdown, in an emergency situation, how could people then still trade and deal with each other? And last but not least, a big challenge from the perspective of the Bank of Israel is the accessibility and also the competitiveness compared to other digital types of payment, which is not fully solved yet. And well, obviously there's always some kind of privacy issues. Just some more numbers. We just mentioned it's roughly 120 blockchain companies in Israel. Just to give you an impression where other big sectors are, the AI sector, which is, as we know, to some extent interrelated, roughly has a tenfold number of startups in Israel, focused on all big industries, and cybersecurity also has some 300 startups in the Israeli sector, focusing on trust, focusing on cyber espionage and encryption. So I brought those two examples just to give you another impression about related industries and what the Israeli market can offer. To conclude for today, and then I'm very much looking forward also to your questions and any remarks you may have. If you're from Germany and you are interested to do more with the startup nation and the blockchain nation Israel, just give me a buzz afterwards. There are several challenges. A Bertelsmann study a couple of years ago found out German companies actually lack a market access to the Israeli startup sector. They lack transparency with regards to relevant players, and they lack usually internal resources to find the right partners. So this is why the German government said, hey, let's do something for a change. And we were asked as ELNET to initiate the German-Israeli network of startups and Mittelstand with a focus on several industries with a strong backup, cross-partisan from all the parties in the Bundestag, well, except the AfD, because we don't talk to the AfD. So what we do is we promote basically German-Israeli business ties with this program on digital health, on cybersecurity, on green tech, on safe and smart city, blockchain always included, and that should be enough now for the ad part. So if you want to become a partner of this network, just let me know. For now, I say thank you very much for your attention, for bearing with us, and let's have a discussion now.
BLOCKCHANCE 2021.